Hello and welcome, everybody. I am very excited to be here with you all today again, together with Puneet. And in our last episode, we talked about the bliss, and both of us really enjoyed that conversation. And after our conversation, I felt like part of that bliss really is the dark. So part of the light is the dark. Um, but what I personally experienced along that journey, a lot of darkness actually, but we just wanna talk about the darkness today. And the way we're gonna talk about it is through our own experience, I would say, to bring a little bit of that lightness in the darkness. So in case you are at a point right now where you might be suffering, our intention today is to just give you a different perspective on the suffering, on the dark. And I would love to invite you to start dancing with the dark, because the dark is just part of the light. And as Carl Jung said, the dark, the light, no difference, or something like that. That's what I experience. And the moment we really understand that this is the moment actually to experience bliss, no matter what might be going on. So let's get started. Puneet, I hand it right over to you.
Hi, Victoria. Hi,
Hi.
everyone. Yeah, I love this topic. So darkness. I would say, my spiritual journey and maybe most people's spiritual journey starts with suffering. I think suffering is a huge aspect or a huge pull towards wanting to change something in our lives. Like I wanted to basically get rid of my suffering, or I was just not accepting my life for what it was, and a huge part of it was this feeling of uneasiness or restlessness, and just not finding a comfortable place to sit on. It's like just being in a chair that is just not comfortable. And I just, this is uneasiness, and I wasn't quite sure why uh why that was the case. And I basically started my search with reading these sort of spiritual books, and they all talked about the two causes of suffering was, craving and aversion, right? Which is like I'm craving something, and I'm, don't want to feel something, or I'm like resisting something, and it was uh, true, which I think like that is the underlying cause, but it took a long time for me to understand what that really meant. Uh, And Yeah, so I think like desire, for example, I came to America from India, and I wanted this American dream and wanted to like have all of the fancy things. Uh, and that was like the way I was living life. And at the same time, there was a part of me which was unsatisfied. So, I was like really understanding what desire really meant. That, I got something that I wanted, but then after some time, the joy and the bliss of it faded, and then back came this restlessness or this uneasiness again, and then starting to trying to fill that with something else. So, wanting to desire something else. And then it took a long time to understand that, there's this suffering that I want to fix. And I do that by trying to distract myself with toys, right? With objects, and going to, let's say, like trips, or like traveling, to going to concerts. Like all of those things are obviously fun in the moment, but I realized that I was just always trying to move away from the suffering and not really facing the suffering, and like not really understanding what was going on. So I think, like you said, like shining, there is this light and darkness aspect to it, but like the moment you shine light, there is this sense of really understanding the cause of why I'm feeling restless. Uh, like there is, and for me, my journey has been through uh, a lot of body and somatic perception. So, like I mentioned in my previous previous talks, that where Vipassana is a big one. So in Vipassana, you're paying a lot of attention to body sensations. And this particular tradition focuses a lot on physical sensations, which appear as, pleasantness or unpleasantness or discomfort or fear, and it's a very visceral feeling. So I dove very deep because I was very excited about this technique. And what happened to me was my body kind of like completely opened up. And so I became extremely sensitive to uh, discomfort. And so it was hypersensitivity to discomfort, which actually made my suffering maybe exponentially worse because, a small trigger would create this visceral, this unpleasant sensation in my body. And I would make it worse by resisting it. And so like, the intensity of it, like, so for example, like I would, let's say, get into an argument with my boss or like with my partner, and it would cause a uncomfortable situation on in my physical feeling in my body. And that is like the first step of discomfort. But then there would be this additional layer of suffering that I would add to say things like, I shouldn't feel this, or I want to get rid of this, and like really fighting that sensation. And that was like my whole life actually, which is just like trying to fight what was happening or trying to get my own way. Uh, and realizing that sometimes, I do get my own way, but sometimes I don't, right? Like, and getting my way or not getting my way is not really important. And when I do get my way, it felt like I had this sense of control. And when I didn't get my way, it felt like my sense of control was fading away, or I was losing sense of control. And that was what gave me a sense of panic. So uh, I think this underlying sense of control, I think, was this deep-rooted belief that I had that I could control things, and I could make things happen my way. And if things didn't go my way, then somehow something is wrong. And I need to basically panic and try to get it closer to my idea of how things should be. And so that was for me, that's like the core of my suffering, and then my darkness, I suppose, and my realization that control is an arbitrary thing. Like I have this belief that there is control, but actually there is actually no control. Like sometimes things work out, sometimes things don't work out. And there is so many other factors at play that end up that influence outcomes of things. And I have this false sense of control. And so the moment I realized that, I think my ability to accept what was happening exponentially increased. Because when something unpleasant happened, so like in before, when something unpleasant happened, I would try to fix the unpleasantness. But now when something unpleasant happens, I realize that, oh, okay, unpleasantness is happening because I'm not getting what I want. uh, and then immediately there's another uh, I would say like this understanding or reaction or like this acknowledgement that there is no control, right? Like trying to control something that has already happened is unrealistic, and is a false habit. So it was really seeing that I have built this habit of resisting unpleasant things for my whole life. And this habit was so strong that it was very hard to even see that that's what I was doing. But I think just increasing my awareness of how my mind is operating and how my thoughts um, happen sequentially, this one thought of like pushing away or resisting the sensation, I suppose, in my case, was the start of this panic. of like, oh, I don't like this, and I push, and then that push causes a further sensation. So it's almost this, rolling down this hill. Like it starts with taking this one step down the hill and then slipping, and then it's this avalanche of unpleasantness that comes up because I resist the resisting itself. So it's this circular process. And so once I was able to catch that, I'm not saying that, I don't experience any unpleasantness. Like I think unpleasantness is just part of being a human being, and like the darkness or like the suffering is the first step, which is I don't get what I want and I'm unhappy about it a little bit. I'm like, that didn't happen or something unexpected happened. But I think the second part of shooting myself in the foot of saying I want it differently and it should be this way or it should be some other way, for me was I've realized is an unnecessary action that my mind is taking, which always leads down to suffering.
To the
Um,
actual suffering, I would say, right?
yeah, to the actual suffering. There is no other suffering other than that part.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
uh, and
yeah.
I think we all have this, you said dark night of the soul, which is so true, like which I guess comes from, the Christian tradition, which I think is where the phrase comes from. And I come from, Eastern traditions, but I've certainly experienced like so much like suffering where I'm like, okay, like people must describe this too and have ways to figure out like how to get beyond it. And I did come across this dark night of the soul, which is this deep, visceral. I just feel that, we just have a lot of unprocessed emotion in our bodies. And every time we are clear-headed, this from the unconscious, something bubbles up from the past because it needs to be processed. Because I think our body, like from a science perspective too, like, we live in this world of entropy where everything is sort of dissolving. And so all of these past experiences where there was a lot of energy, or it was an energetic experience, which might have included like suffering. And if we didn't process it fully, it kind of gets embedded back into the unconscious. And the unconscious is this place which is storing a lot of these like unprocessed experiences, and mostly the parts where we suffered. And when we are now sort of willing and open and stronger to be able to face it, they do bubble up. And when they do bubble up, if we have the sort of ability to stay with it and not resist it even further, like and really feel that entire experience, it dissolves. And then our understanding of like, oh, okay, I can face this unpleasant situation too. And we get this belief in ourselves that, okay, it's just a feeling, it's just a sensation, I'm safe. And even though it feels like terror and a dark night, I'm still okay. Uh, and just having that sort of confidence and the ability to believe in our own selves and capacity, really, at least for me, like really increased. And then after that, it became a game. So like you were saying that, once I understood that, oh, it's just a feeling, it's just a sensation, it's like breathing, right? Like I think sometimes my breath is fast, sometimes my breath is slow. Similarly, sometimes the sensation is pleasant or it's unpleasant, but it changes. And even the unpleasantness is not permanent. And so I was able to then be excited about, unpleasantness coming up because I was like, oh, time for me to process more stuff and be more free. So it was, yeah, exciting. So every time like fear came up in situations where, I'm maybe like at work, I'm like giving a presentation and suddenly there's this stage fright, like a panic of sorts. And I'm like, oh, wow, look at this. Stage fright is coming up. It's coming up because of all of my past experiences. I don't necessarily go into each of them, but I clearly know that, okay, this is a past thing that's coming up, time to process it, and then just go with it. And it just so happens that, it all works out. And my part of my mind is now less afraid of stage fright. So it's like a huge growth uh, mindset attitude too that starts to develop, which is like, I want to grow in all aspects of my life, and any aspect which causes a little bit of resistance, I want to dive into that. And so that became a game for me, to just kind of dive into all parts of human experiences, which caused me to kind of resist it a little bit, or like have a little fear about it. Yeah. So love to hear your thoughts, Victoria.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I definitely agree a lot about the resisting part because I feel that has been a long part, a big part of my journey as well, like the resisting.
Mm,
And the thing is, I was not even aware of it. I think and the moment you actually realize that you're resisting, is at least for me, the way it was, it's like, it's actually not that complicated. It's actually so much easier. It's actually really simple,
yes.
And I was like, oh
Mm,
my God. But then again, like the humanness comes in, like we want to make everything complicated. And I feel,
mm,
yeah, why why do we want to change? Why do we want to have a new experience? Because we are in a situation where we are faced with something that we dislike, faced with discomfort. And this is usually the moment when we're like, okay, now I need to change something. At least that's how it was for me. That's
mm,
how my journey started some years ago, when I was like, okay, I was suddenly, my father's death, that just brought me into a situation where I was just like, okay, nothing made sense anymore, and now it's time for me to change. So then
mm,
first it was about like getting rid of that suffering. So how can I actually transform that suffering? So for a long time it really was about healing the pain, the grief, the emotions that came along. We did not have a very close relationship, so it was much more than the grief. It actually opened me up in
mm,
completely different ways than I would have expected that. So for me, it was not only the grief that came along, it felt like my whole life I was completely ripped apart with that external circumstance. So then that was the first time I experienced this kind of like external, like in my outside world, something changed that really
mm,
that really evoked big emotions that I felt at times I could not deal with. And then of course slowly I found ways to just be with it. And as I shared in one of our last conversations, for me back then it was yoga. For me back then it was meditation, to really start connecting, to feel myself actually, to get
mm,
out of those thoughts, to get out of those emotions, and really just feel myself again, to connect with myself again. And that was actually the moment when I realized, oh my God, I'm completely disconnected from myself. Who the fuck am
mm,
I? I have no idea who I am and what I want. And then all by a sudden everything just breaks apart, and you're like, okay, so what do I actually want? And this is beautiful because at the same time it's that crumbling, that falling apart, that breaking apart, and at the same time it's that opening that cracks us. And yeah, like in the darkness when you have like that crack, like the light's coming in, and this is the light that is like, okay, there is more available for you to experience. There is more of you actually to experience, because who you think you were until now is actually not the truth. It's just like some old stories that you just kept believing on.
mhm,
And then I kept, so then basically that was the journey, like kind of like getting rid of that pain, getting rid of that pain. And but again, it was something outside of me that actually caused that pain. And then later on, like a few or like very short time later, like it was a time in my life where a lot of external things happened, like the death of my father, the death of a dear friend. Then my brother, he had a psychosis. So that was like another, again, it's like that fear of losing somebody that you love. It's intense. It's some big stuff that is being stirred up in you, trying to control, right? Trying to make that. And I was completely in that game, like trying to make him work, trying to keep him
Mm.
somehow alive, trying to find a way for him to be healed and stuff like that. And I was so occupied with that mission, that again, I was disconnected from myself. And of course,
Mm.
I had tools, like as I was breathing, I was meditating, I was doing my yoga. So there was that way, but for a long time, it was all about like fighting what is, really
Yeah.
fighting what is. And I feel, or what I realized last year, or what I understood deeply, I feel, was it's just the suffering that we're choosing. We're just choosing it. And if I'm choosing the suffering, I can also choose ease. And that was just that one thought. And I was like, is it actually that simple? And I'm like, oh my God, it actually is that simple. So then over the last few years, I mean, I was deeply, deeply involved in like personal growth, in like mindset work, in like emotional intelligence, in expanding myself, my potential. I was just deeply involved in that. But somehow I was so caught up again in that suffering. And I noticed, even though everything seems to be okay, there was like that dissatisfaction. And then it was no longer about like an external situation that was happening, like the death or the mental disease or whatever. All by a sudden, it was about me. All by a sudden, it was about me. And and then I noticed and I realized that I have been fighting all along. I've been fighting against myself, but really, really ugly. It was an ugly fight.
Mm.
And there were, of course, there were a lot of moments that were very blissful. There were a lot of moments where I experienced love or connection like I never felt before. There were moments where I experienced more bliss, more love, more connection. So there was this evolution, but somehow there was that underlying suffering. Somehow, and I just could not get to it. And I thought, okay, that's just normal. That's just the way it
Mm.
is. And this is what I'm realizing often. That it's our normal. We think that that's just part of the game, the suffering, the fighting, but it actually is not. And again, what you talked about, I resonated with that a lot, like the resistance. Having become aware of me resisting what is, resisting the pain, resisting, and I mean, you're gone,
Oops. Can you hear me?
you're back.
I'm back. Sorry. I don't know what happened.
So then it's the resistance,
Mm.
because we have this idea of how it has to be. We have this idea of how it has to be, what we want, how we want to feel, how we want to experience it. And this is the cause of the suffering, because we don't accept what is.
Yeah. So
Because
in Eastern traditions, like in, Vedanta and both in Vipassana, cause of suffering is ignorance. Like that's the root cause, which is we don't know something. Like we are ignorant about ourselves, like who we really are, and we have false understanding of what we are, and we have false
exactly, yeah,
expectations from this world. Um, and what we are looking for is happiness. We spoke about that like last week, which is we're always trying to feel happy and satisfied and like expand in a state of expansion, right? Um, and all of these uh, moments where we feel contracted is because of this ignorance, where we have this idea that happiness is over there. And I want, like, the example that you were sharing was like, wanting this person to do X, Y, and Z and wanting them to do it, and they're not doing it because you think that if they do X, Y, and Z, then I will be happy, right? Like, but the truth is that we are like letting go of that expectation uh, creates that sense of ease and creates that sense of openness. And operating from that place is so much more blissful than operating from that place of contractedness.
So
Uh,
yeah.
and whether or not your what you want ends up happening is irrelevant then. And then you just do what you need to do because you think that is intelligent action, which is, if you want to, I don't know, apply for this job because you think that is something that would be good for you, you do it. And if you don't get the job, that's okay too, right? But then if we operate from a place of contraction, which is I must get the job and I will be happy only if I get the job. And so that we are operating in a way where suffering is inevitable. Like it may not be now, but it may be in the future because you may get the job and you'll be very happy, but then at some point you might lose the job and then you'll be terribly unhappy. And so I think just seeing that like a particular way of operating leads to suffering, uh, and everybody has their own insight into how their own brain works, or how they've internalized a bunch of different habits. And like you mentioned that you had to it was just an instant realization of ease. You can operate from a place of ease. And so like that instance was instantaneous for you, but it probably took a long
It took
time
a
to get
long,
there.
yeah. But
This like the
again,
sim
again, what I want to address is the choice that each and every one of us, no matter what has happened in the past, no matter what is happening right now, and this is where we are taking our power back, where we're claiming our power, where we're choosing what we actually want to experience. And we have that power, it's there. And I
Mhm.
feel again, this is just another illusion that we keep alive, that it has to be hard. We have to do certain things. We need to meditate for hours. We need to do this. We need to do that
Right,
to then get there. But the
right.
truth is, it is so much simpler. You can just choose it. And the other day, like when I was like, shit, it's that simple? Yeah, it's that simple. Choosing it. And then what you just said, so I want to say a few things that you just said about the, about applying for a job, and then like if you don't get it, then it's okay, la 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 la. But again, like what's already happening very often is we want to get that job, but then we're telling ourselves, but if I don't get it, I should not be disappointed. I should still be happy. So this is actually already creating something that we don't want to experience. If it doesn't work out, we already have the option, sending that option out there. If it doesn't work out, well, you know what I mean?
Right. I guess you're saying you're talking about intention, right? Like you're saying you're creating both pathways. So, you're maybe setting yourself up for failure if you are thinking from that perspective, because you're
Not from
thinking about,
failure, from limit, yeah, from
yeah,
limitation,
from
failure,
limitation.
limitation,
Right.
yes,
And I
yeah.
was talking about it from a perspective of uh actuality, which is, yes, you have a desire to apply for a job, and that's true. What happens is not in your control in that sense, like the sense of control, because there is this feeling of agency which we tend to have, and that sense of agency is an illusion. Like there is this feeling that I have choice, and this feeling that I can choose things, and I'm choosing things. But the fact is, choice is being felt, I suppose, right? Like choosing is just happening. Like there's no really a chooser. Um,
There
and
is,
s-
there, I
but
believe
it's
there
not,
is a
but it's
chooser.
right, but it's not this limited ego that is choosing. It is this sort of intelligent principle that's operating, and it's not limited to just this individual ego that's choosing, right? Like it's choices are being made because of social ideas, right? Like today I'm choosing to use Zoom versus something else because
Uh,
why? Because Zoom is more popular, right? Like I mean, like
yeah,
from that
yeah.
lens, like why are we choosing the things we're choosing? Uh, we're choosing it because of our conditioning, and maybe because of the state we were in when we had a bunch of those experiences. So if I had a very pleasant experience about, I don't know, eating a mango or something, then I will choose to eat a mango when given a choice about which fruit do I want, right? So we do experience choice, but like I think there is no chooser. Like I don't think it is me who's really choosing. It's like the choice is just happening. And so I found that, the freedom from uh I would say this world and its suffering has been from this really seeing that actually there is suffering only when there is a sufferer. Like the moment
Hmm.
the sufferer drops, right, which is this individual ego, then there is no suffering at all. It's only when like there's the sense of like I am suffering, what I wanted didn't happen, this and then I didn't get what I want, and
But
the
you,
outcome of
yeah,
yeah,
no, go ahead.
uh, yeah. So like both the ego and the suffering arise at the same time, uh, right? But then if the ego drops, then there is just the thing, and there's no interpretation of I didn't get what I want because I didn't want anything in the first place, if that
But
makes sense.
again, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense, and it doesn't make sense. Like
Yeah,
everything,
it is
right? Like
contradictory. Yeah.
it doesn't make sense, and it just doesn't make any sense. And I feel like in the Eastern teachings, there's a lot about like desires are like cause for suffering, right?
Craving is. So desires is
Cra-
inevitable. Craving is.
the
Craving, which
craving
mean
is,
so there's a distinction between craving and desire. So
yeah,
desire is I just want something.
yeah.
Craving is I will be happy if I get what I want. So that's the distinction, which is there's nothing wrong in wanting things in this world. But because everything is a play, you can choose and you can want, but if you are resisting what is happening, then you realize that, oh, I actually was craving because the you can only detect the effect of craving. You can never detect that whether it's a craving or not while you are experiencing it. So like, I really like I want the job, but the whether it was a desire or whether it was a craving can only be determined when you either get the job or don't get the job. And if you suffer when you don't get the job, then you realize, oh, wow, I was craving the job. I wasn't really desiring the job because I had attached, my entire sort of happiness on the job and the outcome and all of these other aspects of, whether I'm intelligent or, like this sense of ego that comes up with, uh, which not getting a job might prove to you that, oh, you're somehow stupid or like you're not intelligent enough, all these other aspects which follow. And that is an outcome, right? But while you want the job, you may not even know that that's what's happening. Um, if- so it is subtle. It is very subtle because it's different for everybody. Um, and then the flip side is the aversion of craving is one, which is from a place of want finding happiness in things. And then the second is the aversion, which is if this happens, then I will be extremely unhappy. And
So what I've noticed is that we often this what already creates a lot of suffering, that we often don't give us the permission to actually want what we truly want. So based on like complete disconnection with ourselves, based
hmm,
on conditioning, how things have to be done, based on what we think is possible. And this is the first place that actually creates the suffering, basically, because we're doing things, we're living a life, we're creating a life that is actually not in alignment with what we truly want.
hmm,
So then Another cause of suffering is we are going for what we truly want, and then all the stuff is coming up, all the conditioning that held us back so far from what
Hmm.
it actually is that we want, the fear, the shame, the guilt, like all these kind of uncomfortable emotions that are somehow stored within ourselves, in the body, in the brain, memory stored in there, connected, activated. So then what's happening, right, is that we often resist because we're like, but I want this, and now I'm feeling like this. That doesn't match, no? Like, I want to feel
Hmm.
blissful, like the connection, the idea of living that dream, the idea of, or the vision of like experiencing myself in that other reality should actually be blissful. But now what's happening? The opposite of that.
Yeah.
So then what often happens is that people think they're doing something wrong, and then they just stop. And then they think they failed. Then they think it did not work out. And this is where the acceptance is coming in, where it's coming in like the dancing with the dark, the dancing with the dark and with the light. Like, we always have both sides. It's like an ongoing up and down and turn around. Sometimes you wish it doesn't go down that deep into the dark, and then after you're like, okay, it was good that it went down that deep, because now I just experience the height in a more different way, like more, yeah, just more powerful, more free, more liberated. So then again, it all
Hmm.
comes back to accepting it, being with what is.
Yeah. I agree.
And
So what I'm hearing is you're saying that sometimes people want something and they put effort into getting it, and if they don't get it, they feel bad and they feel shitty, and you're like, oh, I actually want to feel good. And because they feel bad, they may not end up pursuing it because they feel the sense of failure. Is that what I'm
we,
hearing?
yeah, and that's what I'm
Right?
noticing
Yeah.
as well when I'm working
Yeah.
with my clients. Like
Yeah.
something is coming up, an
Right.
old stuff, an old story that is
So,
beautiful, that it's coming up because it wants to
right.
be resolved. It's just like energy that wants to be moved and wants to be
Yeah.
put in a new order. But what is happening, that we are judging it. And the moment
Right.
we judge it, because we have a different expectation of how we actually want the experience to
Mm.
be, how we want the experience to unfold, is the moment the suffering begins. Because we
Hmm.
don't accept that whatever it is that is coming up is just
Right.
happening
So,
for us.
I guess it boils down to the sense of control, where it should be this way and it's not, right? Like
The
there is
control, the
this expectation.
expectation,
Yeah, expectation.
yeah,
Yes.
the idea
Uh,
how it has to be done, like how
right.
bliss actually is. And again, what we said
Right.
at the beginning, even in the darkness, it doesn't matter. Like, there is bliss there,
Hmm.
it's always present. This is our most natural state, bliss
Right.
and love. That's
Right.
just the
So,
truth.
so yes, completely agree here. So, like, the mind has to get to a place where it feels bliss without any external object, right? For it to essentially understand that the cause of bliss is not external, right? Like, I think we are all born with, or at least we're conditioned with in society, that when we get what we want, that's when happiness comes. And we certainly experience happiness through getting what we want, right? Like I uh, get the favorite meal, I feel very happy. Somebody praises me and I want to be praised, I feel happy. And so we are getting these messages that when I get something that I want, I am happy, which is true. But then but then we don't realize that actually when we get what we want, we are feeling happy because of our natural state. Because now we're in a place of no longer desiring, and we're really enjoying what we have. So we are just in the now, and we're really blissful because of being in the now. And what we wanted has led me to be in the now. because I got what I wanted, and now my mind is free from the state of desiring. Uh, and so
But
until
then the
we,
next desire is coming up.
right, but for a moment we feel
For a
blissful,
moment, we,
right?
if that's what we think we need to be blissful, then yes. But then
Yeah.
again, like the suffering starts again the moment
Right,
it's
right. So,
experienced. Yeah.
which is why I was saying we
What?
need to essentially feel blissful without any objects, right? Like really feel blissful, and like not because I got what I wanted, but because I have experienced bliss without anything. And this is like, oh, why am I feeling blissful? I have no idea. But the fact is, I'm feeling blissful because I am bliss, right? Like there is this bliss that is there. And until every person has their experience of bliss free from external objects, there will still be a part of the mind which will always think the bliss is out there. So I need to search for it in the world. And so, you said that there was this shift which was instantaneous. You're like, oh, I can choose bliss. Why am I choosing the struggle? Why I can choose ease, right? And so like until the mind knows that ease is right here, it will always try to find ease somewhere else. And I think that is maybe the cause of there's a huge cause of suffering too, of not
Yeah.
knowing.
And I don't
Uh,
think it's a mind thing. I really think it's like a soul thing. It's like that knowing.
sure. Yes.
You know, it's
Well, I
like
mean, yeah, yeah,
you
absolutely.
just
Right.
know
Well,
it.
right. And it's an
And
instantaneous knowing. It's like you either know it or you don't know it, right? It's not an
it's
understanding. Yeah, it's
it's
not an
not an
understanding.
understanding. I
It's a
mean,
knowing.
it's
Yes.
like just this knowing, and I think this is the
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah.
And because the understanding, I mean, like how many times have we heard these kind of things, right?
Right.
And of
Right.
course you can figure it all out with your mind. And I feel like the mind is helpful at times to really guide us there. It is really
Yeah.
helpful to tell ourselves, okay, yeah, I can choose it right now. Okay, then
Right.
I choose it again. Like when I'm
Right.
noticing I am suffering, oh, but I can choose ease. Okay, then let's just choose ease right now. Oh, I can choose bliss. Let's just choose bliss right now. So of
Right.
course we're also training the mind, we're training the body to get more used to these kind of states. And then all by a sudden, it's just like bam, you
Yep.
just remember it because this
Yeah.
is
And
actually who you have been all along. You just
right.
forgot. And then you're like,
Right.
ooh, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
So like the mind actually transforms, like the knowing causes the mind to transform. And so then now the mind can just perceive these two choices, or even understand that, oh, right now I'm in a state of struggle, drop it, right? Like, so the ability to just drop it and be, oh, I'm back into the place of ease. And like the struggle might come up
exactly,
again, and I'm like,
exactly,
oh, I'm
yeah.
in the struggle, drop it, I'm back into the place of ease. So like that perception of that even happening uh, is because of this knowing that happens at some point where it's just okay, now I have experienced this thing, and now I can know the difference between being at ease and being in a place of struggle.
And that place of struggle, honestly, it's really because it's really just happening because we are resisting what is. And like dancing with the dark,
Yeah,
which I just love because it is very playful. It's like, okay, being with it.
yeah,
Being with it. How long does it take? I don't know.
yeah,
Sometimes it's just there and then it's just gone. Other times it takes a little bit longer. Other
yeah.
times
It
it
can take
takes way
hours.
longer
It can take
than I would
hours. It can
love
take
it.
days. Yeah,
Okay, so then, and then again, we recognize the resistance, we drop
yeah,
it. We
right.
choose, okay, we're just with it. So then, yeah, it is this reprogramming of actually giving ourselves the permission to let it be easy, to let it be joyful, to let it be whatever I choose it to be. And this is something like this is like an instant, I feel like an instant experience of bliss when we're choosing
Mm,
something else. And of course it
yeah,
takes the awareness, okay, what's going on right now? But
yeah.
again, I want us to drop the idea that it has to be hard. I want us to drop the idea that it takes forever, and I really want us to choose something different every moment.
Yeah. And I would even say, as I'd like to add that there is, the struggle is like for me at least, the experience of struggle is like two parts. One is just an unpleasantness, and then the second part is the resistance to the unpleasantness.
Yeah.
And so if you can separate the two to say, oh, there's this unpleasantness here that I'm experiencing. I don't know the cause, like there's no point even going causation hunting, but it's there. And then there's this other idea that it should not be there, or it should be different, or I can change it. And that is the resistance. And so if I can basically, and this is all the mind, like this part, like the mind trying to have other ideas about what things should or how things should be. And if I can drop this, and then I'm all left with is just a sense, like a feeling, right? Which is, it's like a cloud, which is like, dark. That's about it. And so, and underneath that is this whole part of bliss, which is also there. And so there is this unpleasantness here, and then there's this surrounded by bliss. And so then even unpleasantness can be felt with a lot of bliss. And so there's that reprogramming that you're talking about, which is, oh, unpleasantness is actually bliss too, or it can be bliss too. And like really seeing that
Yeah.
happen and becoming, so then the resistance itself fades away, because then there's a realization that, oh, what was I resisting in the first place? Like the resistance is there only because of a false belief that this is bad, or this, I cannot deal with this, or this is too much, or this is going to somehow be hurt me, and I'm unsafe. But the moment I see that this unpleasantness is actually nothing, it's actually bliss. It could be bliss too. Then this strong idea starts to dissolve, and that's the sort of doing that over and over again, and like really feeling that, and saying, "Oh, I was hitting myself with a hammer," and because when I stop hitting myself, it feels good. That's the only reason I was doing it. Yeah, so like we will stop hitting ourselves with a hammer, because you'll realize that this hurts, and you're seeing that, oh, I'm hitting myself, it's hurting again. Okay, this time I'm not going to do it, but the old habit is still there. I'm going to hit myself once more. But then over a period of time, it just drops, because the habit has dissolved, and you're no longer, the hand doesn't appear again.
And
At least
one,
that's been my
yeah.
my experience of it.
And one more key ingredient in that in every moment is love. It is
Yes.
love. It just is love. And because we always have, there are those two parts, the duality, the polarity, like the one end and the other end, the both extremes. But in the end, it's just the same. If we let it melt together, if we let it become one, it's just the same, and that is love. So then, if we remember that, if we can really, and I know how challenging it is at times to move
Hmm.
into a state of love. I know. But
Yeah,
those are the moments that matter. When you just
totally.
love yourself, no matter what else is going on out there,
Yeah,
if the shit is hitting the fan, but you stay in love.
yeah. Just
Wow.
like give yourself like an inner virtual hug, and just like, just be with that feeling, or like
Yeah,
that discomfort,
yeah.
and just be like, it's gonna be okay. I love you. I love all parts of myself. And it's beautiful just to be able to even experience that. Uh, and it'll all be okay.
It will even be greater than okay. Right? All right?
Yes, it will be.
Yeah,
It'll be
yeah.
so crazy that you just don't even know. It's like there's no words that can describe how magnanimous we are. Uh, Literally, like nothing can, like, it's undescribable. That's how amazing we all are. Like our true nature is just infinite, infinitely blissful.
Yeah. So then it really all is about remembering. It's not about us needing to do anything, us needing to prove anything, us fighting for it, us being worthy of it. We
Hmm.
are it. So, so that is the starting point. We are it, each and every one of
Yeah.
us. No matter what's happening out there, no matter what's happening in there, we are it.
Yeah.
So
And
knowing, remembering that you are it, no matter what. And this is, as you just said it, like the infinite self or the divine self, or however you want to call it, your higher self. But this is just the truth. And from this state, of course, there are different things happening out there that might challenge you. Of course, that is just like, this is just like the dance between dark and the light, like the duality, the up and the down, like it's just part of it, the rhythms of life, right? The different cycles. But
hmm.
can we just be in our heart when it is happening? Can we just remember the truth when we think we cannot remember?
Hmm.
And really just remember that feeling. And the more we remember it, the more it actually takes over. The
Hmm.
more love takes over the fear, the sadness, the frustration, the anger, whatever it is. And just being with it from a loving state. Loving yourself with all that is. And it's just it is just that full spectrum of it all. It's not one or the other, it is everything. And the moment we really give ourselves the permission to be everything is the moment we experience ourselves in that wholeness, in that blissfulness. And then it doesn't matter anymore what's going on out there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Like my teacher says, marinate yourself in that from that place. Just keep
Yeah.
marinating yourself,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then and
Yeah.
and and then you become it because you are it. It's
You
and
are
then
it. You're it. And
you
then you
are it.
remember
Yeah,
it.
and then
Yeah.
the mind essentially just
Yeah.
dissolves. Yeah, uh, wonderful. Okay, so we started with suffering and we ended up with bliss,
Yeah. I
which
love
which
that.
is which is what
Which,
it is.
which exactly, which is what it is. And
Yeah.
like the more we really accept that we are bliss, the more we accept whatever it is that is going on is bliss as well. It just has a different form yet. And with us being with it, we have the power to actually shift the form from labeling it as something bad and labeling it, or not labeling it, but just letting it be as what it is.
Yeah.
And when it is what
I
it is
yeah.
love.
Like it's interesting, like even the wanting to convert the energy from one form to another, right? Like there's this in the beginning, it feels like there is this, movement of energy, and you're like, all of the energy is in your lower chakras, and you want to sort of move it higher and transform it. But after a while, it's like even the effort of doing that is like, it doesn't matter because it's all at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it's all bliss, and whatever
Yeah.
is coming out, it is. So like, it's if the resistance to it is the wanting to change it, wanting to convert it, wanting to shift it, right? Like, but like moment we see that even that efforting is some form of this belief that I can control it. Uh, and then if you like drop that too, then it's like, all right, like then it truly like you are directly in contact with the world in that way of like there is no resistance to it. So like it's very rich, it's very right here, it's very present, and yeah, it's just vast and beautiful. And despite like it being unpleasant and all of that, it doesn't like all of those things like fade away. Uh, and yeah, I guess I wanted to also say that like we started off with suffering, and suffering is a huge uh indicator of the possibilities of bliss, which is like, there's this suffering, and my universe is telling me that, wow, this is an opportunity for me to release this and experience more bliss. And, it's a suffering. Like my teacher says, like suffering is always an invitation to prayer, and just
Mm.
like, And it's interesting. I think, like, to me, as our minds get more and more quieter, we start to experience the suffering of of not just ourselves, of other people too. And so, like, if there is this sense of identity which is diminishing, so it's no longer my suffering. Suffering is just suffering. Like, you walk around, I live in Oakland, and there's so much suffering here in terms of, like, poverty and homelessness, and you walk around, people on drugs. So people are suffering. There is suffering. People are um, experiencing deep pain. And as our minds get quiet, we start to experience that. And so I don't think there is ever going to be a point where we will not experience suffering, because the world is infinite, and there's infinite beings who are, have the potentiality to suffer, and we will be able to sense those. And so um, our ability to process suffering and really be with other people increases too. Because if we can be with our own suffering and, like, really, like, understand the cause and all the flavors of suffering, then we are available to be with the sufferings of other people as well. And that's certainly been the case for me too.
And I
Um,
really love that you shared that because, again, it's no longer about wanting to fix or wanting to help or wanting to change the other person when they are experiencing the suffering. You just know, okay, it is for their highest good.
mhm,
And there's nothing bad about that. And I know in some cases it might sound okay, but wait, what do you mean? There's nothing bad about that. But you
mhm,
know that that person has the power as well to fight, or maybe that person even is at ease in one way or another. You never know.
mhm,
Um, but I feel like that really, like that's what changed for me as well. Like
mhm.
I no longer need to fix anybody. Like I
Right.
know there is no fixing needed because it is perfection the way it is. And I know that person that is
Mm,
experiencing what it is experiencing right now is perfection. And sooner or later that person will remember its perfection, its bliss.
yeah. Yeah.
And that situation is just part of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
One
It's
puzzle
all
piece
unfolding beautifully.
unfolding, always
Yeah.
unfolding. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Hmm.
That
What
was
a
lovely.
beautiful conversation about
Yeah.
dancing, dancing in the dark. And I really, I have had quite a few periods in my life where I have been experiencing the darkness, and I feel some part of me also knows, like it's just part of that whole game,
Mm,
like I just love to work as well, work play, like with my clients. I'm working with these dark emotions as well because I just know like the power of it, that it's not what it seems like it is, that it's
mhm.
just so much more unfolding in that moment. So that's why I'm kind of like loving the darkness, but there were also there I also noticed like a tendency to getting addicted to these kind of states, because we of course we have that tendency, our body, yeah, if it just knows, okay, that's what it knows, then we love to be
Also,
back
we
there.
love the stories too. I,
So we
I I
love
think
the
that,
stories. Yeah.
yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
it creates a sense of identity as well. Of, like,
Yeah.
I am I have had all of these different things come up in my life, and then we just, like, live from that place of, like, I am that sufferer. And so that becomes part of our
Yeah.
identity.
It
Uh,
does. It
yeah,
does. And I mean, if we look when we look around, right?
yeah,
I mean,
and
there are
I
a lot
think,
of
like,
people suffering, but then on the other hand, there are a lot of people who are really deeply enjoying themselves as well.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Did you want to say something?
no, um,
Would you like to, what are your last wise words,
I
words of
have no
love,
wise words.
words of, I
I
don't
can
know.
say words. Yes, words I can say. Um, there is suffering leads to our own. understanding of how our body and minds work, uh, and our own patterns in which we operate. And those patterns are maybe the cause of extra suffering that we add on to, the worldly suffering that is out there, and we experience that. And um, learning to be with the suffering is an opportunity to realize that we are safe no matter what. That there is this intrinsic guardian angel, I can say, that is always there, that is taking care of us. Like nothing is ever going to happen to us. We think we are unsafe, and we are constantly bombarded with messages, especially in today's world with all of like the internet, that the world is going to end, or like our particular way of living is going to end, and fear mongering. There's always going to be information that tells you that there is a need to suffer. But the fact is that the deepest part of us is always safe, is always the bright light that is has the property of being blissful, peaceful, and a place where we can rest our minds and always have this access to this bliss. So um, I think taking this journey and walking through this suffering and really, yeah, experiencing all the different qualities of suffering ends up in a place where we are on this platform, which is clean and pure and allows us to experience this world in a completely different way. And in a more effective way, in a more beautiful way. And I think for me personally, all of my relationships have become more intimate, more beautiful. Sometimes some relationships have, obviously changed into like not all relationships are great, but I think I am able to deal with things in a more beautiful and a positive way. And yeah, I can say it's been a long and hard and tumultuous journey, but at the end of it, I am so glad that I took it, because what else are we here to do? We are here to understand this insane place that we are in, like, this insane experience that we are having moment to moment, and really seeing the ways in which, uh, at least for me, like how my mind has been working against me. And now at the end of it, I feel like I have made friends with my mind. And so now my mind is this friend who I can hug, and it can support me in doing the things that I want to do. The end. That's it. I'll stop here.
Beautiful. Yeah, really beautiful. And I I believe in a world where we are plugged in to that bliss, where we are plugged in to that state of love, where we're plugged into ourselves. And this is what I believe in, and this is my mission here. And the suffering, I feel like there doesn't need to be suffering. There will be some discomfort, there will be some challenges, yes. There will be, because that's just part of this human experience, that there will be.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we expand the different, we have also that illusion, okay, once we get there, it is not going to happen again. But it's just that ongoing evolution. The more we expand, the bigger challenges we get. But that doesn't mean that the suffering is getting bigger. What it means is you are learning, you're mastering to just be with it. And this is what I want us to understand, to just be with ourselves, to surrender ourselves to ourselves. to be
Hmm.
clear about what it is that we want, to really allow ourselves to open up for that truth that we want to experience. And you're the only one who knows what kind of truth you want to experience. But the truth behind all those desires is that we are bliss and that we are love. And I know it sounds very cliche like, but that is just the truth. That is just the truth. So the more we remember that, the more we are actually capable to surrender to the discomfort. And the less uncomfortable the discomfort gets. And I also believe that it doesn't, because you said your journey has been long and hard or something like that and worth it. And I completely agree. My journey has been also like very hard and long. And at times I was like, enough now, enough now. But I also believe that it doesn't have to be that way. I also believe that when we really open up, I mean, it was my journey and I love my journey with all its intensity, and it was perfect the way it was, but I also believe that it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
That when we understand that earlier on, that it can be a different way, whatever way you choose it to be. And this is where it comes back to, like, what is it that you're choosing in every moment? What you said as well, like right here, right now, what are we choosing? And right here and right now, we always have the freedom to choose whatever we want to choose, no matter what we think we should choose.
Hmm. I'm reminded of my like all teachers and parents who say, "Don't make the mistakes that I did. There's a better way to experience life." But everybody makes the mistakes they need to make.
Yeah, and
And
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, there is, like you said, it's all perfect. The journey and the mistakes you make are perfect because why? Because it happened. And there was no other way that it could have happened. And whatever you learn and whatever lessons you learn, they happen because those were the lessons you were meant to learn.
exactly. That
Uh,
exactly, to open just up another door and
yeah,
step right into into
right.
that other room. Yeah,
The body and mind, I suppose, needed to feel those shocks to open up and crack open, and like you said, the light needs to start shining through, and it needs those shocks for it to crack. And yeah, everybody has different shocks that they need. Some people may need fewer, but
yeah,
everybody is unfolding perfectly.
yeah. That is true. That is so true.
Um, wow, this was a lovely conversation, Victoria. Thank you
It
for
it was.
suggesting this, and I think it was beautiful to talk about suffering.
I love it how you how you name it, like the suffering, and I how I name it the darkness. Yeah,
The darkness,
the darkness. No,
dancing with
dancing with the
darkness,
dark. Yeah. Anyway, no, I really yeah, I really enjoyed
dancing
that
with the dark,
conversation.
and salsaing with the suffering. How about that?
And salsa with the suffering. Yeah, that
Yeah,
sounds good. Yeah, I love that. So thank you so much, Puneet, and
thank you.
thank you, and hasta la próxima. Until the next time.
Adios.
Adiós. Adiós a todos. Adiós.